Did your tax preparer not ask you about property tax this year? Oh, gracious. Does that really even matter? Let's talk about what they ask about and what they don't next. So today we are talking about what your preparer did and didn't ask you about. So I'm going to do another video on filling out the tax organizer because it is so helpful when clients fill out the organizers. And if your preparer sends you that yes no checklist, it saves so much time if you can just go through those checklists and say yes yes no no no, because trust me, most of these things you're just going to say no to, and then that just tells us where we need to direct our attention in the interview time. So it's super super helpful. And oftentimes when I have conferences with my clients, not every client wants to have a conference to discuss their results or to go over things, but a vast majority do. And when we go through that, you ever see flowcharts? Like I have the flowchart going on in my head. I'm like, okay, well, this is no, 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 or yes, yes, yes. And so we're going to go this direction or not that direction. But sometimes there's just things absolutely we know we don't need to ask about. Do you not own a home? Do you make less than 100 grand a year? Do you, did I ask you about charitable giving and you said no? Well, I'm pretty much not going to ask you about property tax on your car because I know you're not going to hit that threshold, at least for this year, for itemized deductions. And that's an itemized deductions. Itemized deductions are charitable giving, medical, dental, things like that. And you might, we'll talk about whether or not you had any significant medical issues. But let's say I notice on your W-2 that there's a code W on your W-2. I'm not asking you about medical care. You know why? Because you cannot deduct it as an itemized deduction if you have an HSA, even if you just had that HSA for 2 days out of the year, even if you change jobs. So I'm not going to ask you about that because I don't want to swamp you. I mean, I recognize that tax prep, any kind of financial stuff, it's overwhelming. It can be really emotional. It's really charged. And so I want to keep it as simple as possible. And so lots of tax preparers, they will, they know that, or especially let's say you're a high income earner. Let's say you do have a mortgage. Let's say you don't have an HSA, you did have medical. Well, we're not even going to go there with a high income earner. But let's just say I didn't ask about your property tax on your house or your car. You know why? Because you hit the salt cap tax. You had 10,000 in state withholding. There's no reason for me to ask you about anymore. Not for state and local tax because you can't deduct it. And at least in our state, we don't have exemptions. Now, there's different states that just they don't follow the federal, and yeah, so we might ask about that. But if you don't live in one of those states, then it's not going to apply. So all that to say, just because your preparer doesn't ask you specific questions, I mean, TikTok has been huge this past year with disseminating very false information, and scaring and confusing a lot of people. That really frustrates me because if you watch this channel, I am no big fan of the complexity of the tax code. I am not glad that you have to hire somebody like me to help you through it, and that somebody out there is confusing you to drive business to them. No, that's immoral, unethical, and I just can't stand it. So frustrates me. So I want things to be as simple as this can possibly be, and it's really just so hard. So that's half of what you're paying somebody for, honestly, is to make it simple for you. This really hard thing to make it simple. So I hope that encourages you not only to do the organizer. We're going to do another video on that. Not only to do the organizer for your preparer to make things a lot less swampy and overwhelming when time comes for your appointment, but also not to dismiss that certain questions weren't asked, not to feel like they were overlooked just because they weren't asked. Because just because they weren't asked doesn't mean they weren't thought of. They might have thought of it and just not needed to ask. It's a trust issue there too. And if you don't trust your preparer, maybe it is time to move on to somebody else. Even if it's just like, there's just a vibe you get from them that's just not right. I know I wouldn't want somebody to work with me if I made them feel uncomfortable. So, maybe it is time to move on to somebody else. But anyway, if this was encouraging or helpful to you at all, I really would appreciate if you would subscribe to the channel, even if you unsubscribe later. I only push out content ideally once a week outside of tax season, more often when there's issues that are going on. But you're not going to get a lot of notifications from me, not really. So I appreciate it so much. You guys have a great day. Bye.